So Friday in Venice is a transmedia story. The title Friday has actually two meanings. On the one hand, we are part of the weekend special program of Monditalia, and a weekend, in our case at least, starts always on Friday. So we are always on Friday in Venice. The other reason is that Friday is also the name of a resident of a fictional island I have invented, and which is located virtually somewhere in the Mediterranean, and is considered a kind of laboratory for social improvement, for new ideas on how to rethink our society. And Friday, as one of the residents, is traveling already virtually through Europe for several months and posting observations, encounters, stories about what he's experiencing in his travel since May. In fact, it's a real person. Friday is an actor. I was myself a theater director and opera director. That's why I like to play with different languages and different artists from different professional backgrounds. And Friday is one of those. He's not yet in Venice, but during the next weeks he will participate, and we will have conversations about his experiences during his travel. And of course, we are now in a particular moment of European history, because on the one hand, there were the European elections recently showing that the notion of a kind of a common identity of Europeans is not very strong, is rather evaporating today. There is a kind of return to nation states. And on the other hand, you feel also that the commemorating the anniversary of 100 years World War I is another moment which shows the fragility of our society and our content. So we're somehow reflecting this. But on the other hand, we are of course keen also to read the Biennale itself in a specific way, because Rem Koolhaas asked the curators to create a kind of retrospective about the last 100 years under the title Observing Modernity. And we ask not so much about what does it mean to look back, but rather, having looked back, what does it tell us about the upcoming future? So Friday in Venice is also a project asking the participants of the Biennale, and many of them are our guests in the discussions and performances we will have over the next weekends. We ask them, what are your findings and what does it tell us about the future of our society in Italy, but also in Europe? Friday is traveling through Europe, and you wonder why, because Europe is considered by many people today in Europe, but also elsewhere, as an exhausted continent with a lot of piling up problems which seem to be unresolvable. However, the crisis always also includes the possibility of a change. The state of emergency is also a possibility of set free people from the routines and procedures they were used to, because they're forced to. They have to improvise, they have to rethink the way how to live and to cope with a new reality. So that's why I think there is indeed a kind of connection between our project and Monditalia in particular, because on the one hand, Monditalia is a retrospective about post-war Italy's development, most often a kind of sad story about a decline. On the other hand, it shows an enormous optimism in its expressions, an enormous vibrancy of observations and forms of debating those issues. So it shows that there is enormous creativity in the country, even if it comes to the deepest points to be maybe touched upon. So what I think is that, as somebody said today, who is a representative of a real activist movement here in Venice, that people may, even out of desperation, out of a deep pessimism, turn into something optimistic, because they feel that we will not move on any further if we do not change ourselves first, change our opinion first, change our mood first, that we start really sort of recreating or reinstalling our ability to imagine another possibility, to imagine another world. And Lavapolis is exactly the same effort. It's also trying to, even within the collective, because I'm the founder of Lavapolis, if you want, but at the same time, in the meantime, many people contribute to it. So therefore, it's a collective, if you want, dreaming or imagining of an alternative world, which is not necessarily a utopia, because a utopia is always something which does not really exist. But I think in our world today, there are moments where you see that things are already changing. They are not anymore of the same kind they were used to. And there was a French philosopher, Michel Foucault, who around 30 years ago created this notion of a heterotopia, which is like a mirror showing a reality, but by showing it, in the same time distorting it, changing it already, because it is not the reality, the mirror is not the reality itself, but it's an image of the reality. And therefore, Lavapolis also tries to be a heterotopia of our social condition. And in one or the other way, any form of an exhibition is always a heterotopia of something real. So Monditalia, in many ways, is a heterotopia to the real Italy of today and of the last 50 years. Rem Koolhaas is, of course, first and foremost a famous architect, but he is also actually a journalist. He was even a filmmaker in the beginning of his career, and he always is extremely serious about his writing. And he is known for many of his publications as well as for his architecture. So we have something in common, that we like to express ourselves in different languages. There's something else which is interesting about Rem, and this is that he is also somebody who is known as a kind of forward frontrunner of many events. He triggered very often new debates by launching sometimes even expressions. Just as an example, the expression junk space, the generic city, and others have been absorbed later by the whole architecture community, but created by him. So in many ways, he is seen also as somebody who is always a little bit in front of at least the mainstream. So you can say also the vanguard, a member of a vanguard. But what he is doing here, and this probably has confused also some people, he's actually doing the opposite. And this is also something what Rem likes to do from time to time. He somehow plays with expectations to maybe also sometimes disappoint expectations, surprise people. And this is what happened here to some extent, because he was rather forcing himself and others to looking back instead of looking forward, what he was usually doing so far in his work. So I'm, of course, now keen to force him to do what he's usually used to do. As I said already, the exhibition of the Biennale this year, making a kind of retrospective about over 100 years, from 1914 to 2014, has already generated a lot of findings about the last 100 years. Also some surprising, I know also from the conversations I had with Rem over the last months, there were a lot of interesting, surprising incidents, encounters, debates, anecdotes about what curators of national pavilions or also of Monditalia have discovered in their own countries while researching on the history of the architectural developments in their countries. So on the one hand, we really may have also become more knowledgeable about this period. And that may help us also to assess and to evaluate our current situation, and maybe also anticipate the upcoming future in a different way from what we were used to before this exhibition was open. So in other words, I'm trying to engage Rem in a conversation which is still complementary and to have happened after the exhibition has been designed. So the exhibition is rather something looking back in time, and now we should actually add something to the exhibition in terms of, in the context of the discussion, what actually a crisis means and what a state of emergency may also trigger in terms of possibilities of rethink our procedures and routines we are used to.